Good afternoon and welcome to today's APM webinar, Kick Procrastination in the Pants Once and for All, with our guest speaker, Andrew Payne. I'm Robert Allen, APM Branches Manager, and I'll be your host for today. It's great to see so many people have joined us this afternoon. Please be aware that this webinar is being recorded and you're currently in mute mode. That's not to say that we don't want you to be part of today's webinar, so please fire your questions via your control panel or join us on the Slido with the account code APM Pro. Andrew is more than happy to answer as many questions as he can at the end of this webinar, and we look to give you additional information. This session will count towards your CPD and should last no more than an hour. I personally would like to extend my thanks to Andrew, but also to the volunteers of the APM branches and SIGs who have put in a lot of hard work to make these webinars happen. So, over to Andrew. Andrew is a TEDx speaker, productivity coach, blogger and campaigner. Andrew serves people from all walks of life to help them take control of their time to achieve their goals. So on that note, Andrew, over to you.
Thanks very much. No, it's great. Yeah, what we're going to do, we'll work through a slide deck for about half an hour, and we're going to really pick procrastination apart. This isn't going to be a 30-minute slide deck of loads of life hacks that you'll have heard 100 times over, like make your bed in the morning and learn to goal set. This is really about picking procrastination apart. And then in the second part of the webinar, I'm going to come out the slide deck and we'll do sort of live Q&A and video and really try and work through some of the material that I've explored in this slide deck. So I want you to just think, I wonder if there's anyone on this webinar who has ever had an important job and you know you needed to get it done, but every time you try to make progress on that job, stuff just crops up, distracts you. And so you delay and sacrifice over a long period of time. But as people, we just want to have fun. So when the fun stuff comes along, the fun stuff wins every time. It's understandable, I guess. Unfolded. You faffed and faffed about so that by the end of the day, you got some stuff done, but not nearly as much as you should have done or you could have done. Now, it's understandable. Sometimes we faff about because we're tired or we're bored. Sometimes we faff about because we've saved ourselves so much to achieve on those clear days that when the clear day starts, we look at this mountain in front of us and we're like, oh man, you know what? I think I'll watch an episode of Hounds Under the Hammer first, and then I'll get on to slippery. It's when you either avoid taking action on something or avoid a decision. It's avoidance. But also, it's when you have made a decision, you are taking action, but your progress is much slower than it could or should otherwise be. For some reason, you are choosing to operate in snail mode when actually you could. Now, some of you are probably, surely procrastinate $11 billion a year. Surely this problem is now solved. Think about it. All those inspirational quotes that we read, all those heartwarming stories of the guy who went from couch potato, could canoe across the Atlantic. And we feel such a rush of hope when we hear these stories. And it's probably going to cause me some problems in canoeing solo across the Atlantic. And then we think, yeah, but maybe I'll do something else. I'm going to do it. My life starts today. I'm turning over a new leaf today. And then as we battle our way home through horrible traffic to houses, to feel cynical about the self-help industry. It obviously works for other people. Why doesn't it work for me? Well, as I've said, the self-help industry in America alone is a $10–11 billion a year industry. It has not solved the problem of procrastination. In fact, in research carried out by the American Psychological Association in the 1970s, 5% of American people identified as procrastinators, but today that number's risen to 25%. And in recent research carried out in the UK by the Nationwide Building Society, 2/3 of people surveyed identified as procrastinators. But it's been less successful in solving this life-changing action that they could reasonably take. Would have thought it would have solved that by now. We need a new approach in defeating procrastination, because whilst we can laugh at the $2.5 billion left in unclaimed credit on American gift cards every year, or the 1 million UK taxpayers who file their tax returns late every year and get fined for it. I mean, I guess that's funny, but there is a darker side to the habit of procrastination with credible medical research, depression, anxiety, even heart disease. Fact is, procrastination is no laughing matter. So a little bit about me very quickly before we really get into it. I was a chronic worrier. My nails were bitten and bleeding every day. I had no goals or ambitions of my own. I drifted through life. I was stuck in a marriage where domestic violence was a real feature of it, and it was a horrible time. And as for making any decisions, like if it was a trip between Tesco's or Sainsbury's, I'd need to sleep on a decision like that. I'd need to write a list of pros and cons. And then, owing to some major life changes, I decided I didn't want to be this prattling procrastinator anymore. I wanted to take control of my life. I wanted to live boldly and decisively. So I started to look at coaching more as a self-therapy to begin with. And then the more I got involved, the more I started to think, well, maybe I could coach other people, like just for free, as you do. And so once I've got my coaching qualifications, I started coaching from free, and then I started charging for it, and I built my business from there. And I've since worked with the NHS, RBS, Youth Offending Service, and countless schools and colleges, helping business leaders, helping aspiring leaders to get more done, but without getting busier or burnt out, so they can truly realize their potential, but without sacrificing their most precious things. So the kind of stuff that I'm coaching on is particularly boundaries. For example, too many people take on too much, or they get dragged into things they'd rather not be part of. Boundaries are crucial to managing yourself, to managing your time. And as I came out of my abusive marriage, one of the things I wanted was I wanted to be tougher, but without becoming a jerk at the same time. And so I created my own model for creating boundaries. It worked well for me, and I now use that model with the people that I serve. I also help people to master the art of prioritizing, because everybody says, oh, well, you need to learn to prioritize, and it should be easy. It's just like ordering a queue of tasks, important at the front, less important at the back. But the problems emerge when that queue misbehaves and you've got pressure on all sides. So how do you handle that? What tools can you use to consistently make wise decisions when the pressure is on? I also help leaders to kick procrastination in the pants and develop decisiveness as their natural trait. I help business leaders to delegate. But you see, a common complaint I commonly hear is that, well, I want to delegate, but my team just don't do the job properly, so I'd rather just do it myself. Yeah, I'm just so overworked. But there is a way that you can delegate whereby you maximize the chances of that job being done on time and to the standard you want. You just need to know the process. I also help people to schedule and plan. So those schedules and plans are something that are inspiring and uplifting, and not something that's boring and restrictive. And I help people to develop their resilience, because resilience and productivity go hand in hand. But in this webinar, we're going to focus on procrastination, not through inspirational quotes, life hacks you've heard 100 times over, or other people's adversity stories, but by picking procrastination apart, because it's only by picking it apart that you will kick it in the pants once and for all. So the first thing you must understand about procrastination is that it's complicated and it's simple. It's complicated because there are many, many causes of procrastination. It's simple because each common cause on its own isn't that complicated to understand. You just got to know what they are and how they affect your behavior and your life. Let me give you a couple of examples from my former procrastinating lifestyle. So, I love food. And I used to have this terrible habit in restaurants that I'd take forever to make a decision. Everyone else, they could decide what they wanted, and the waiter would arrive to take the order, but I'd be thinking, what do I want? Do I want chicken jalfrezi? Maybe I want a lamb kalia. Do I want pilau? Do I want naan? And I'd be umming and ahhing. I need more time. The waiter would then go away and come back, and I'd still need more time. And then, having made the decision, I'd probably change my decision as he or she was walking off with the order. and then I'd suffer the humiliation at the end of the meal of paying on my card. And of course, my surname is Payne, spelled P-A-I-N, and my initial is A. You know, I knew what they were thinking, those waiters, when they were looking at me. Then imagine the following day. Let's imagine I have my clear Thursday morning and I've got leadership workshops to prepare. So I'm going to get in the zone. I'm going to create stuff. The kids are now back at school at last. My phone is off. My brain is sparking because I'm in the zone. And suddenly a thought popped into my mind. Wasn't there a match last night, Arsenal-Chelsea? Wonder what the score was. I'm never going to get back into the zone until I find out what the score was. I know if I head to YouTube and find out the score, then I'll be able to get back into the zone. It's just a 2-minute diversion. It's a sensible investment of time. I check out YouTube. Arsenal won 2-0. Yes! But 20 minutes later, I'm still on YouTube watching Messi's best goals from 2012. 2 everyday examples of procrastination. You've got a dithering diner and a faffing football fan. But the root causes in each example are different, as are the remedies to solve them. In the Indian restaurant, I'm sport for choice, and people can become uncharacteristically greedy when they're sport for choice, whether they're buying a house in a buyer's market, whether they're choosing a meal in a restaurant, or whether they're choosing a new recruit from a large pool of outstanding candidates. When we're sport for choice, even though all the choices are attractive, the pain of letting go of attractive choices makes that decision-making process difficult. The fact that we're going to definitely end up with a great option is no comfort, because what if it's not the very best we could have had? As for YouTube, I'm not sport for choice. I'm just curious. I'm lacking in self-discipline. I'm unrealistic about the power of social media platforms to keep us hooked, because they're built to make us stay. You see, as people, we procrastinate for all kinds of reasons. Sometimes we procrastinate because we're scared of the job that needs to be done, or of the person that's asking us to do the job, or just we're scared of failure. Sometimes we procrastinate because we're bored. Sometimes we're simply sleep deprived and not functioning at our best. Sometimes we've reached the end of a season in a project, in a relationship or a job, and our typical high standards are slipping. Sometimes our technology habits have taken control of us and we've barely noticed. So with all these different causes, and I've only named a few, by the way, there's a load more, fairly obvious that a one-size-fits-all remedy to solve procrastination is destined to fail. What you have to do is examine each example of procrastination in your life. Understand and examine each example on its own. Understand that each example will have a unique set of circumstances which have created it, and so only a bespoke remedy will be successful in treating each and every saga. As a dithering diner, for me, it was something I actually did want to change. I took decisive action. I remember the time thinking, do you know what, I need to get on top of this. This is just embarrassing. So it was just a case of creating some simple protocols. I honestly set myself a 5-minute time limit to make a decision. That's it. And no changing my mind. That was it. I was not going to change my mind anymore. And if in doubt, my rule would be to go for something I'd not previously tried. If I was in a new restaurant, in an old restaurant, or a restaurant that I knew well, or in a new restaurant, just something that would push my boundaries. And over time, by sticking to these disciplines and protocols, I actually eradicate the problem. I don't think about it now. I make quick decisions in restaurants. As for YouTube, well, let's take a moment to consider technology, because within this one area of distraction, there's different forms of technology that distract us in different ways. See, my experience of working with hundreds of people of all ages is that there are 5 common technology time-based thieves. In fact, 4, but I'm going to put 2 of them together into the 4th. Phone, social media, TV, YouTube, and online addiction. Usually I separate that out as online gaming or online pornography. Now, together, these rob 3 hours of time from the average person in the UK, according to statistics. That's 20 hours a week. That's 10 years out of an 80-year lifespan. Each of these has its own triggers and its own remedy. Now, in the time that we have on this webinar, I'm going to focus on the first 3. I also think with some of the online addiction, some of the issues there, it's probably less appropriate for me to pick that apart now on a public webinar, and it's more appropriate to do that one-to-one with people, as I do. But for anybody that is struggling with online gaming as an addiction or online porn, there are ways of defeating this. It's not as difficult as you think, but you are unlikely to defeat it on your own. So please do get in touch after this webinar. But back to these first three. You see, the average person apparently checks their phone 120 times a day. I mean, that is ridiculous, because if you imagine that each check is, say, 30 seconds, that's still 2 hours of time. That is crazy. Now, to master your phone addiction, you've got to master your phone. You've probably heard people telling you to turn it off, put it on silent. But what if you've got kids at school and you're the emergency number for your school? You can't necessarily do that. So what I do, because I used to have a terrible habit with phones, is Wi-Fi and data mobile are off on my phone as the standard operating procedure 7 days a week. I only turn it back on when I need it. Let's say I'm lost and I need to use the sat nav, and then when I found where I want to go, I turn it back off again. Or what I also do, because I'm very busy on social media in the different things that I do, I schedule in the blocks of time in the day when I will be on social media, where I turn the Wi-Fi and data mobile back on my phone, and my phone goes absolutely crazy, spasming and pinging as all this stuff comes in, and I deal with it within that block of time. But once that block of time is over, data mobile and Wi-Fi off. So my kid's school could still reach me, but social media can't. The TV, me and my wife, we're working parents. We've got 4 children living at home. It's been a real challenge actually the last few months, and I'll say more about that in a bit. But even without COVID-19, we are exhausted at the end of a working day. And without protocols, we wouldn't talk to each other. Let me tell you, we just wouldn't. We just watch TV every evening. It's just easier. But we have a rule of 1 program a day as our protocol, and we stick to it. We never channel hop. If we've got into a series, we never watch back-to-back episodes. 1 episode each night, then it's off. It means then that we have to talk to each other. We have to find other things to do. We grab books and so on. With YouTube, when I access it, I've trained myself over time to be particularly mindful, because for YouTube, for me, wandering from video to video, because of course YouTube gets to know what your habits are. It throws up really attractive and linked options. It understands what you want to see. And so I eradicate my watch and search history every time I come off YouTube, so it can't get to know me that well. But also when I'm on YouTube, I'm very clear that this is dangerous territory for me. See, with procrastination, there are different triggers, different causes, different remedies. Sometimes the remedy is just a small tweak, a simple protocol that you put in place and you stick with, a new habit which feels relatively easy to put in place and it can be easy to stick to. Sometimes the surgery is far-reaching. It's the end of a relationship to eradicate procrastination, because actually your procrastinating was a symptom of you being in the end of the season, and as I said earlier, your standards generally slipping. And of course, the end of a relationship brings turmoil, pain, or suffering. But if you're at the end of a season, all you can do is move on to the next season, or just stay stuck in end of season, and your procrastinating will get worse and worse and worse. So if you really want to kick procrastination in the pants once and for all, so it doesn't get back up again, treat each case of procrastination in your life as a unique incident requiring a bespoke remedy. Work through every aspect of your life with an open mind. Your work, your family, your friends, your finances, your hobbies, your self-development, your health, your community, and ask yourself 3 key questions about each area of your life. Where are my procrastination sagas? Where am I avoiding decisions, or where am I going slow when I could be going fast? What's causing these sagas? What's truly going on? And what unique remedy, what unique strategy am I going to use to eradicate each saga one by one? The pension that you keep putting off from starting, but you're in your early 40s now, it's bugging you that you haven't started it. But part of your fear is the look on the IFA's face when he or she realizes that you're in your 40s and you haven't started your pension yet. You just can't bear that thought. Or the cholesterol test, you know you should take, you've put it off, you've justified it in COVID because, of course, doing blood tests, the NHS is under pressure, but you're 55, you've never had a test before, you're not in the best shape and you eat too much cheese. You really should probably book that test soon. Or the difficult conversation with your partner, you fear you're drifting apart. And if you have that difficult conversation, it won't be much fun. And you can never find the right day for it. But with tricky conversations, the right day is never coming. You just have to get on with it. The problem in leaving isolated procrastination sagas to fester is that they join together in a web of procrastination where each strand feeds and strengthens the other so that the web wraps around you, holding you tightly, and procrastination becomes who you are. If you want to become a decisive mover and shaker, you have to untangle that web, not with quotes and other people's success stories, but by identifying and pulling apart each incident of procrastination, strand by strand, taking action on each of them, dealing with each incident until that web has been untangled. And as you untangle it to stop it reforming, you keep tackling every new incident of procrastination that may crop up, stopping it in its tracks by dealing with it as a unique case needing a unique remedy. And if you really want to make sure that procrastination can't get back up again, become an early person. Choose to be someone who deals with the post, the letters sooner than they had to, the tax return. Sure, if you're busy today, diarize it, but then do it when you diarized it for, but do it earlier than you had to. The car is making funny noises, so book it into the garage. Don't take a chance that it will just be okay. You have a consistently sore lower back. Well, check yourself into the GP. Why are you putting that off? When you become an early person across the board, actually, procrastination can't exist and the web can't reform. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, this is fine. Thanks, Andrew. You picked procrastination apart. You promised that there would be no life hacks. There hasn't been. But there's this tiny little problem called coronavirus. And I would really value a bit of help because this has caused chaos for me when it comes to productivity and procrastination. And I would say, okay, listen, I hear you. You know, I've continued to coach people through this crisis and really, in terms of productivity issues, it's caused so many different problems. And with 4 children, 3 boys under 7, trust me, some of these problems I can really resonate with. But before we open up this for discussion in the second half of this webinar, I just want to put to you the 4 main challenges that I've experienced myself and seen others experience. And the first, I think, with coronavirus and all that's gone on is uncertainty of the future. And the fear that uncertainty brings has caused people to just get stuck in worry. And the thing is as well, when the future seems uncertain, we ask ourselves, well, what's the point of trying? Because anything that I attempt, it might just be a waste of time. And as we weigh up the likely returns on our investment of time, if those returns look unlikely or unclear, then we do generally put less into the task and therefore we faff about more. Uncertainty can eat up our mental energy and we become so consumed with worry that we have little mental space for anything else to do. The second challenge that I've seen and experienced myself is just having the kids at home. You know, if you've still got a job to do and your usual option for childcare, i.e. the grandparents, is temporarily unavailable, and if your partner, like mine, is an NHS key worker, life is relentless. I mean, part of the stress is you want to make it a good experience for your kids. So when you're with your kids, you're feeling twits that you're not working. But then when you're trying to work, you're feeling guilty that your kids aren't having a better time. And of course, all the other parents at home, they're building tree houses in the garden. They're baking perfect cupcakes for the NHS key workers. But for you, well, you think, okay, well, I need to do that. I'll try and bake some cakes. You promised the cake baking to your kids and open up the cupboards and you've got no flour. You couldn't even organize yourself to check whether you had flour or not. The stress is horrible. When you're working and trying to get stuff done, it doesn't feel like you can rest at all. Third challenge is you've been furloughed. You're lonely. You're bored. I work with a lot of men recovering from domestic abuse, and for a lot of them that can't see their kids at the moment, the pain of not seeing their kids, the pain of being on their own, the pain of being furloughed has put them into a spiral of gloomy depression. And when you're in a spiral of gloomy depression, getting anything done is a challenge. And when you just got all this time on your hands, it's kind of difficult to think, well, where's the best place to invest my time? And you're kind of envying the working parents being run ragged by having their kids at home. And of course, the parents being run ragged are envying you because you can have a bath whenever you want to with a book and a glass of wine. And the last impact that I've seen is this toxic productivity, which is where you flog yourself to death to achieve more, where you are productive, but that productivity is driven by guilt rather than positive feelings, where you are desperate to prove that you are superhuman. And this going on in the back of your mind does not create an optimum resourceful state. Toxic productivity can come from constantly comparing yourself with others, which of course isn't helped by social media, but it leads to being profoundly dissatisfied with your life and who you are. So these are the 4 problems that I've seen. But what I want to do now is come out of the slide deck and hand the screen back to Robert and maybe just pick through some of these and hear some of the challenges that you've been facing and some of the questions that you may have. So I'm going to switch back now out of slide deck mode.
Perfect. Thank you, Andrew.
And you should have me in my front room with my shirt. And I do have actually football shorts on, but I'm not going to show them to you. We'll just stick with my shirt.
I think that's the classic webinar look. I think I definitely add to that statistic about the 3 hours a day on technology. So I think I definitely need to review my habits there. So yeah, thank you for sharing some great knowledge there. So as Andrew says, please submit your questions either on the control panel or within the Slido account. So we have a question here, Andrew, from James, who says, I procrastinate when it's time to delegate. Any tips?
We all know that delegation, in order to get more done, you need to delegate in order to free up time. Where I've seen delegation done badly is, and it never ceases to amaze me, where people will say, well, I told such and such what to do, he hasn't done it. Or I've written a long list of instructions, but they haven't even done that. But when you really get down to it, actually a conversation hasn't really taken place. And there are things. So first of all, conversation every time when you delegate, whether that conversation is phone, Zoom, but too many people still leave it to email, or they see delegation as just this quick passover, handover. But actually, delegation, I mean, I've got a formula that I work through of areas to cover. But really, in order for people to understand what needs to be done, to understand the value of the job, to understand where some of the hazards and risks may be, you want to have a two-way conversation. If it's just you barking out instructions, which we sort of, outside of a leadership training room, we know that we shouldn't just be barking out instructions, but we often revert to type because it's quicker and easier in the moment. But if you imagine when you're on the receiving end of loads of instructions, you don't remember them. We can only remember so much at a certain time. But when we're involved in a conversation, we will remember more about whatever it is that's being talked about. So I think as tips to delegate, two-way conversation, less instructions, questions that get the other person to think, even if you think, well, I'm not very good at questions and all that kind of stuff. Well, in that case, ask the person, well, look, this is the job that I want to get done. And then ask them to reflect back to you, what do you think needs to be done? For me, it's a really important job. What do you see as the difference between doing this well, doing it badly? Where do you see, can you see any areas where there could be some difficulties? But start getting that delegate to do the thinking and to do the responding, and then they will remember, rather than if you're just barking out instructions or just emailing them loads of instructions. Does that help?
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Andrew. So we've been flooded with lots of nice comments to say thank you for sharing, but we've also got a flood of questions as well, which is lovely. So Catherine's asked, can you share some insights into how to become an early person without beating yourself up about kicking things down the road?
Yeah, well, first of all, there is nothing wrong with kicking things down the road. And you might think, hang on a second, isn't he contradicting himself here? What's he talking about? there's a difference between procrastinating and diarising. Procrastinating is where you're like, oh, I'll do it later. And there's no fixed plan as to when you'll do it later. You haven't written it down, so you probably won't remember. I mean, I'm 45, and with 4 kids, I can barely remember my own name some days. I have to write everything down. And so I think, first of all, by all means, kick stuff down later down the path, if there's a logical reason for that. And particularly if you are diarising it, you're committing to doing it, but maybe next week, because that makes sense. There are some things where to do it immediately doesn't make sense. So I think it's more about saying, as a general trend, I'm going to be someone that does deal with things earlier, not just at work, because the problem sometimes is we separate work habits from home habits. Actually, once you start to become an early person in the way that you may handle your friendships or the way you handle your own health, these habits then spill over into the other areas of your life. So I think, so yeah, if you're going to kick it down further down the road, try to diarise it. That's a helpful thing to do. Nobody's perfect. There'll be things that I put off, but I just know that probably 80% of the time I am an early person. I get stuff done early, and the other 20% of the time, actually, there's logically a good reason as to why to kick it further down the road. But I mean, I'm a firm believer in avoiding guilt, but also taking responsibility at the same time and saying, well, actually, never mind. I haven't had the best day, but tomorrow I definitely will be better, and I'll be more on it, and I get up and I am more on it. So I just would encourage you, Catherine, don't feel guilty, and understand as well, if you're changing habits, it will take time. It really will. I mean, I talk about kind of my change from when I was stuck in a domestic abusive marriage, which was just horrible, and I was stuck in a job that I hated, and I was in a bad place mentally, to go from that to someone who's blissfully remarried. I'm decisive, I'm happy, I'm definitely someone with strong boundaries, and I would say I'm a strong personality. But that wasn't something that happened overnight. That was a process of 3 or 4 years of self-reflection, coaching, getting some external support, reflecting again. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrew. So moving on to the next one, as I say, they're certainly coming in. So Irfan has asked about decision making, and there's normally some worry about, have I made the right decision, or what should the outcome be? How would you overcome this?
But to some degree, we never know whether we've made the right decision. It's helpful to have a time each day, whether it's just 10 minutes, something like that, where you can reflect on the day that's gone before and then on the day that's after. A lot of people journal. That's a really good habit. But even if you don't consider yourself to be a journaler, just having that 10 minutes of time, because of course, things can change rapidly. I work on the basis that when I look back on the day before, have I made the best decisions with the information that was at hand at that point? Because quite often situations can just emerge, and you're not going to completely know. It's very rare that we have a full, certain picture that we can make very concrete, certain decisions with. Most of our decisions in life involve a little bit of a gamble. And in most things, the picture doesn't truly emerge until you take a step forward, and then a bit more of the picture becomes visible. Then you have to step forward again and a bit more. And then you think, oh, hang on, I've gone down the wrong path here, but that's okay. So I think self-reflecting is important, but I think also accepting that in most of our decisions, the picture isn't certain.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, review and move forward. Katerina has asked, similar to what you're doing now, you're helping others, but is there a way to motivate others when you see them being a bit procrastination in their life?
Do you know, I think it's important. Yeah, there is definitely, but I hope, as I've showed today in the presentation, that there are so many reasons why people can procrastinate that the best way to motivate someone is to just come alongside them and get to know them and try and work with them as to what that might be. So, for example, I do a lot of bid writing and HR and coaching work for a charity, and I've got a very good relationship with their CEO, and I've got an 18-month-old, and he sleeps quite well now, but the first year of his life, oh man, it was just awful. It was absolutely terrible. And I was conscious that I was hugely sleep deprived, as lots of parents of young children are. And so I was very honest with her, listen, I'm sleep deprived. My decisions may not be the best. I may well procrastinate, and I just sharing that with you in case, you know, if you feel that my work has slipped, I want to know about it. If you think the quality of my bids has slipped, please tell me, because this is an issue. So you could have sleep deprivation, or you could have, when I was stuck in my abusive marriage, I was a terrible employee. I mean, I was taking sick leave left, right, and center. None of it was because I was actually ill. I was trying to manage my situation at home and crazy suicide attempts and violence, and it was bad. But the reason why my work performance was poor, I wasn't working well, was I was caught in domestic abuse. So the key to helping others is having that basis of relationship with them first, and understanding that if they're going slow, if they're not performing well, if they're not motivated, there's so many different things that it could be. Maybe they've reached the end of the season and they almost don't even know it yet. And the end of the season is actually in your employer, and they need to move on. And so it's getting alongside people.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrew. And thank you for your honest insight and clear steps moving forward. Now, Joseph has probably asked the question that I would ask as well. So he says, "Hi, Andrew. I'm beating myself up for not upselling during lockdown. Massive procrastination issue. Am I being too hard on myself?" And he says, "Many thanks."
Yeah, I mean, I'd want to know, Joseph, you know, and feel free to message me afterwards. That's fine. What I want to get to the basis of, again, why. I mean, some people don't upsell if it's their own business. There's almost an embarrassment factor. They don't want to be hard on asking for too much money. They know people are going through it. So I don't know what you're selling and who you're selling to. So I probably want a bit more information. But I think what I would just say as a general thing is we all need to be a bit gentler with ourselves. It's been a difficult time for all of us in different ways. And, you know, as I've said, in my final slide, you know, we've all had different struggles. You know, some of my mates haven't seen their kids for months, and that's really hard. That's really affected them mentally. But me, I've been run ragged. I just, the work has been, so we all need to be just gentle with ourselves and try to serve other people and help others as best we can. And you know what? If you've looked after yourself and you've helped some other people over these last 4 months, you shouldn't feel guilty about anything, in my opinion.
Perfect. Thank you for the reassurance. I'll jump to one of the questions on Slido. But before I go on, Andrew, you mentioned about reaching out to you. What's the best way for attendees to reach you after this webinar? Is it LinkedIn, or what's the...
So listen, so connect with me on LinkedIn. That's great. If you're going to connect with me on LinkedIn, I don't post incessantly, but I probably post a few times a week, a bit of a mix of stuff on productivity, but I do also campaign around domestic abuse and parental alienation. So if you get in my post through on your feed, it'll be a mix of that kind of stuff. But my name, there's not that many Andrew Paynes with the spelling of P-A-I-N, so I'm quite easy to find on LinkedIn. Delighted to connect with you. If, having watched this, you're like, you know what, I want to bounce some stuff around, I want to see kind of what it looks like to work with you more closely, then head to my website, which is www.andrewpayne.co.uk. And halfway down the homepage, you can book a free strategy call. And I can talk you through the work that I'm doing, but it's not like a hard sales call. And within that call, I can ensure you get some value from it. Even if you think, well, actually, I'm not going to work with you for whatever reason, I'll ensure that you get some value for that time. So website and LinkedIn are probably the best.
Perfect. Thank you, Andrew. So a question that I've had, and sadly, I don't know who's posted it, but I find it hard to keep engaged whilst working from home. How can I refocus when I notice I've lost interest?
Yes. I mean, again, if you explore boredom, which I imagine could be part of the issue here. You know, there are two types of boredom, aren't there? There's a boredom where you're very bored with a specific task, so it's isolated. You're in a good place mentally, but you're bored with something you've got to do. But there's then boredom that's widespread. You're bored in general. Everything's boring. Everything feels boring. And so, I mean, when I was after my marriage had broken down, and I was then unemployed for a while as well. I was living with my parents. It was a tough time. My parents are great and all, but at 34, you don't want to be living with your parents with no job and no prospects, and you're not seeing your kids and whatever. And so I know this sounds a bit cliche, but the start of every day, I would just jot down some things that I was going to do that day, and I'd make sure, some of it was work and trying to find work. Some of it was stuff that I knew that would just get me going, whether it was going for a run. And I had a bit of a plan, and the plan was written down. It wasn't just in my head. And I tried to stick to the timings that I put alongside that plan. And for me, I can only say, for me, that helped me in those really dark times just to keep myself going. But again, I mean, you're working, it sounds like the person that posted the question, you're working from home all the time. That is hard. I don't know whether that's likely to end soon or how that looks. But for me, having a clear plan and structure helps me to avoid getting bored. Otherwise, even now, even though I'm completely relentless with time, and I have like a window of time each evening, a couple of hours when the kids are in bed, where I can get stuff done. If I don't have a bit of a plan of what I'm going to do, I'll just faff about. I really will. And so having a plan is helpful.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrew. And that kind of echoes what you were saying about TV series, maybe spreading them across the week and, making that time to maybe disengage from work and enjoy life.
Yeah, that's totally right. And I think that's why my plea to everybody that's been on this is that there are so many different causes to procrastination. You've really got to get under the surface as to what actually is happening here. It could just be, if you're a TV addict, like I could be, those simple protocols are just really helpful. I mean, we don't ever question those. We never break them. So on a Saturday night, we don't watch TV together because generally I'll be watching Match of the Day because I'm a football fanatic. But that's my program. That's my choice on a Saturday. And we really stick to it and it really works for us. And yeah.
Yeah, excellent. And as a fellow Arsenal fan, I wish you well for this year. So a good one from Gordon. How do I change the feelings that arise, i.e. anxiety, dread, when I think about a task, for example, tax returns?
Yeah. I mean, I don't like doing tax returns either. I don't particularly enjoy admin, and I've got it diarised for September because in September, when the kids go back to school, my life changes. Usually I do my tax returns like ASAP to get it done and out of the way. So I do find diarising helpful where I've written it in and it's going to get done that week. And in fact, if I've got some clients wanting meetings that week, it's tough. I'm doing my tax. That week is being done. And so sometimes having it written down as a commitment and sharing that commitment with your partner or whatever, this is when I'm going to do it. Do you mind checking it? It could be your mum. Do you want to just give me a call that week and make sure I've done it? That's really helpful that there's some level of accountability. I definitely am better. So for the charity that I work really closely with, they used me originally because of all my coaching stuff that I do. But then I got, their funding was terrible, their funding stream. So I got into writing all their bids because I can write and copyright and I've got a good track record, but it's not something I enjoy at all. I mean, me sitting down at a computer screen writing complex bids, that is not my cup of tea. But I do it and then the bids come in, so they ask me to do it more and more, so I don't mind doing it. But the way I approach those bids, given it's not something I enjoy doing, is just, I really do understand it's just bit by bit. If there's 30 really complex questions, well, I'll just tackle 2 today. That's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to do any more. And I'll tackle 2 tomorrow, and I might tackle 2 the day after, and just working out stuff bit by bit. To me, it's helped me to not see this enormous, horrible task. It helps me to see it as something that I can do, just need to break it down and do it. And I know that's fairly standard advice, break your big chunk tasks down into small chunks. But if you can break it down and get some accountability and diarise the steps doing that task through your plan. So do plan at the beginning of each day. That could be something that will help you.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrew. As you say, making things achievable as well. And I think this probably follows on and probably quite close to that question. What tools would you recommend about getting to the root cause of the issue? And that's from Hazel.
If it's a procrastination issue, I actually recommend, and I can send it to anybody that wants me to, just if you connect with me on LinkedIn, I can send it the document across to you. I actually think that the image that I included in the slide deck of that iPhone, the tool that I recommend is simply to be sitting down with that maybe once a week, and really having some reflective time. It could be a Friday evening, Saturday evening, it could be a glass of wine, whatever is pleasurable to you, and really think through your life. Where am I holding back? But use that as a tool to make sure you do a bit of a check-in with every part of your life, because too often we get too fixated on work, or we get too fixated on, I don't know, if we've got issues financially, our head just gets absorbed in the finances, and then we neglect other important things. And that's we do that as people. When there's one big problem, we get so absorbed in it, we can ignore the other things. So that iPhone image that I showed in the slide deck, I'd recommend that you ask me to send it to you, which I will do quite happily, and you use that as a bit of a check-in each week.
Excellent. Thank you. A couple of people have posted and then supported this question on Slido. As a natural lifelong procrastinator, I find myself swamped by professional and personal to-do lists. How do you get started rather than procrastinating further?
So professional and personal to-do lists, are these lists that you are writing yourself, or you're being swamped by other people's? Are you basically being swamped by other people's jobs that you need to do yourself?
It reads more that it's a personal list that someone's making. Both, I've got a professional to-do list, but I've also got these things in my personal life that I need to do. How do I get started, rather than going, oh, look at the long lists?
Yeah, because there's nothing wrong with writing a to-do list. The problem with to-do lists is that you can often do the tasks on the list that you can cross off most quickly and easily. List crossers, I call them, and they love crossing the lists off. And so obviously they're just going to do the easy, quick tasks because they want the quick wins of crossing something off. And often the most important jobs are the things that are not going to disappear off that list very quickly. And so, there's lots of logic. I would never have to-do lists and don't do this. Well, I think to-do lists can be helpful. I think there's nothing wrong with that. But the way I plan my time, and I'm going to share quickly now, we've got 5-10 minutes. So I plan my time every day, 10 minutes at the start of each day, Tuesday to Friday. Monday, I spend about 20 minutes, because not only am I planning the 10 minutes on the Monday of what I'm going to do, I'm also having a think about the rest of the week, so I don't lose sight with the wider goals. And on the first Monday of each month, I spend about half an hour, because I'm doing the Monday that week, and I'm also looking at the month. It's not loads of time, but that helps me to keep in touch with short and long-term goals. But then I use a hardback diary, A4 size, and I have blocks of time of half an hour. And so my to-do list, I do have a to-do list, I guess, in my diary, spread across the days, thought about in terms of when would be best to put it where. And I find that better to work from that rather than some scrap of paper that my 6-year-old will probably scribble on anyway. And there's just this long list of tasks where there's no breakdown of how long one will take, what's needed. A tax return, there's different bits of information that I need to get hold of. I need to speak to the guy at St. James Place. There's different conversations that need to have. So for me, planning in the way that I plan with that A4 diary and spreading that to-do list with thought in terms of, so for example, I don't like doing tax returns. I'm glad someone brought that up. But I need to be in a good place to do that. Morning, obviously. The afternoon for me, I either need to be meeting people and having meetings and having that social interaction, or I need to be doing stuff of low value, like just connecting with some people on LinkedIn or doing some Facebook posts or something or other for the business or the charities that I'm involved with. But if I really need to concentrate, it's got to be in the morning. But again, a to-do list doesn't take that into account. But if you've got it spread through your diary and the more complex mental tasks are in the morning, then that's how I would do it. That's how I would do it.
Yeah, excellent advice. Plan your day, figure out when you work at your best, and go from there.
Because some gurus will tell you, get out of bed at 5:30, go for a run, get pumped up for the day. I'm not a morning exercise. I do a lot of sport, always evenings and afternoons. I did try running at 6:30. It almost killed me. I'm not going to do that. If you come and wake me up for a run at 6:30, I'll be shouting at you. Seriously, I want to sleep. So you've got to work out your best times physically and mentally. Take that into consideration. But I would encourage people to move away from to-do lists but use that A4 hardback diary and spread it across that, rather than just like on a long list of paper, or like even if it's on your computer, if it's just this massive long list, of course it's going to look overwhelming and feel like you can't do it.
Yeah, again, great advice. And some people are coming back who have asked the questions, and they're saying thanks very much for the answer. So your advice is definitely helping people, and
I appreciate that.
there's loads of lovely comments saying thanks for the information, and I've probably got another 15, 20 questions. Just to let everyone know, we have recorded this session and it will be on the APM website, and Andrew's kindly letting us put it on the APM YouTube channel as well, so you can get that information. I'll also share these questions with Andrew, and in a given time he's happy to answer those, and we'll put those online as well. So just moving on, Andrew. So we've got Emma, who says, hi Andrew, thanks for the interesting information. Sorry, couldn't get my words out there. As part of my work, I have quite a lot of non-urgent tasks to do. No one is putting any pressure on me to do these, so I find it really easy to put them off. Do you have any tips for this particular case of procrastination?
Yeah, I have those too. And of course, and it's a great tool. I mean, Stephen Covey's time management matrix, which probably most people on this webinar, most people professionally have come across this before. And he talks about how we often jump to the tasks that feel the most urgent, whether they're important or not. And the tasks that are important and not urgent, they're usually our game changers. They're usually our life changers, our business builders. But because they're not urgent, even though they're so fundamentally important, partly because they're not urgent and partly because they're big things that will take time to do and a little bit of time each day, we easily put them off. So, I mean, that's a very common habit. For my non-urgent and important tasks, and I have plenty of them, I make my own deadlines if there is no deadline. And again, by using the planning system that I use for myself with my A4 diary, you know, at the start of the month, I have that bit of planning time. That helps me. I also do a thing which works quite well for me when I'm taking action on a big task, where if I've got something planned for a Tuesday, but I didn't get it done, so on Wednesday I'll move that across to Wednesday. I'll give it a little black dot to indicate that I've moved it across. If then I don't get around to do it on Wednesday, I'll move it to Thursday and give it another black dot. Now I've got 2 black dots. If then I don't get around to doing it Thursday, I'll move it to Friday. I'll give it 3 black dots. And when it gets 3 black dots, it gets a bit of an interrogation. Why am I putting this off? Is this important? Do I need to really crack on with this? This isn't good enough, you know. And I don't get plagued with guilt, but I take responsibility. And having that little system for me helps me to flag up the tasks that I'm procrastinating on. But for non-urgent, important jobs, for me, part of cracking that and getting on with them is knowing that these will be probably my life changers. They just are. And so they need to be diarized and planned in. I need to hold myself accountable. Like 3 black dots for me works really well. I guess you can draw a sad face, you could draw a red flag. Don't spend too long drawing the flag, otherwise you'll start procrastinating on something else. But recognizing it's important and planning it and fixing your own deadline if there isn't one. When are you going to get done by? And some accountability. Again, it could be, you could have your own coach. You could do it in a group. You could do it. It could be your mum. It could be anyone. But as long as you've shared that with someone, and that person will hold you accountable, that's a helpful thing to do. I hope that answers it.
Yeah, that's a great tip, and that's just been supported by Deb, who says, "Love the black dot idea." So you've definitely got someone taking it forward. So I'm conscious of the time, and as I say, there are a lot of questions. Perhaps we could end on this one if we could. So it's from Ishan, who says, who are the characters famous for procrastination yet successful in life? Do you know anyone famous or?
That's a great question. There will be somewhere. But off the top of my head, I don't know of procrastinators who have been hugely successful. I know of reformed procrastinators who say they used to procrastinate and now they've done very well. But I think generally, you know, success comes from hard work over a long period of time, from getting on with things, not putting things off, from constantly reflecting on what you're doing, from not beating yourself up. All those things. Success is not just down to one thing. It's a complex thing, and there's a lot of things you have to put in place. So I don't know off the top of my head, but if anybody else does, fire away, throw those names in.
Yeah, Ramesh has just provided Leonardo da Vinci.
Leonardo da Vinci, okay, yeah. Famous procrastinator.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll look into that. I didn't know that, so I'll be interested. I will now do some reading on Leonardo da Vinci, because that is an interesting one. So thank you for sharing that.
And then Joseph has put Dean Martin. So
fair enough.
There we go. Apparently Leonardo da Vinci was a perfectionist.
But one thing I would say, though, coming back on this, is you see leadership programs based on sort of servant leadership, and there's a lot of talk about humility, which I'm all about. And you look at Jurgen Klopp's interview yesterday. I mean, just about with Liverpool winning the league, and just his humility, the fact that he gives all the glory to his team, he doesn't take any of the glory himself, and he's an incredible guy. But then people will always say, yeah, but Steve Jobs, he wasn't very humble, and look at the success he achieved. So what I would say is there's always an exception to the rule. There will always be somebody, but Steve Jobs was an exception. But I personally still feel that if you want your team to follow you, that servant leadership is so important. And I think there are probably more examples of people who are arrogant jerks who are just a nightmare to work with. There are more examples of them not finding success, but just that there is one, we get very excited and say, well, this must be the way forward. Steve Jobs did it, so it must be okay for me. And I'd say, Steve Jobs may be an exception. So I would definitely look into Leonardo da Vinci and Dean Martin. It's a really interesting point, and not one that has been asked of me, to be fair, on other webinars that I've done. So I appreciate that. I like to be stumped a little bit. So I'll look at those.
Oh, excellent. So, but yeah, another one is the Dalai Lama, apparently. But there's some additional names for you. But as I say, Andrew, I thoroughly enjoyed today's session, and you've given some amazing advice that I've really appreciated. But looking at the comments coming through, lots of thank you very much, great advice. Has been echoed by the people in the virtual room, if you like. So thank you for giving up your time and sharing your knowledge.
Brilliant. No, bless you, and thanks to you all. I hope you have a great weekend. And no, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Perfect. Thank you, Andrew. And thank you to everyone who's joined us today, taking your time out and putting through some amazing questions as well, which I've definitely enjoyed reading, and Andrew's definitely got a new question to think about in the future, which is great. The APM, definitely running some additional webinars in the future, so keep an eye on the APM website and get involved in future webinars as well. But it gives me great thanks to say thank you to Andrew, thank you to everyone for joining us.